And indeed, the contract was placed and fulfilled. And in 1934, the first model, designated S-42, was wheeled from its hangar and placed in the water. With the unusual combination of very long range and fairly high speeds, the ship fully confirmed the hopes that they had. It was capable of flying across the Atlantic Ocean. It had the lifting capacity, operated at over 160 miles an hour, and had the ability to enter service immediately.
1934 was still a pretty hard time for American aviation. There has been a considerable amount of criticism, some of it undoubtedly unfriendly. And I remember that in July, we received a letter from the president of the National Aeronautical Association asking to make efforts to establish world records, because this was the recognized yardstick of the quality of the ship. Now it so happened that on the evening of the same day, in the morning of which we received this letter, we were able to reply that in line with your letter, the company tried to establish world records, and as of this evening, we added 8.
With the help and support of Lindbergh and Pan American Airways, Sikorsky went on to build a series of highly successful long-range flying boats which pioneered scheduled passenger services across the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Despite his successful fixed-wing designs, Sikorsky could never forget his dream of vertical flight, and from 1929 he began to make a series of sketches and patent applications. Some of these drawings show a remarkable resemblance to the VS-300, which he constructed 10 years later. The technical difficulties involved in the design of the helicopter were immense. The engineers and technicians working under Sikorsky were absorbed by the flying boat production program, and he found himself once more designing and testing on his own.
The helicopter was not a project which I could just to charge to the engineers to do something about, and to test pilot to test and to do something about it also. It was a thing which called for attention, I would say love, I would say all energy, knowledge and support which a man can put in. And of course it was my ambition, my plans, my desire to live my life again, to design an aircraft without knowing how it should be done, because no one really knew properly how it could be done. Helicopter was at that time one of the impossibles. Still, many people considered that no helicopter with good, real control characteristics could and would ever be constructed. Other pessimists said that even if you will construct a helicopter, no one would need this helicopter. I remember a good friend of mine and a very prominent designer, scientist in aviation asked, when would the helicopter go faster than the airplane? Do you know that? I said, yes, I know. The answer is never. When would the helicopter be more efficient than the airplane? Do you know that? I also said, yes, I know that. Never. But I said that helicopter will do a number of jobs which no airplane will do, and which, in fact, nothing else will do except a helicopter. Consequently, that was the idea. While I resumed thinking actively about the helicopter, around the year 19, I would say, well, I thought about it all the time, but more energetically. It was beginning 1929.
Sikorsky was by no means alone in the field of helicopter development at this time. Louis Brenier had constructed a helicopter in 1907, which lifted half a meter off the ground. In 1933, Brenier returned to helicopter design and built a successful machine. Impressed, the French government ordered development, but difficulties in stability and eventually the advent of war in 1939 ended whatever future it may have had. In 1930, Corradino d'Ascagno constructed a helicopter capable of free flight and a limited degree of maneuverability provided by a configuration of 3 tail rotors. In Germany, the famous aviator Heinrich Fokker designed a highly efficient machine which flew in 1936. It consisted of 2 contra-rotating blades mounted on an old biplane body. The propeller was not for directional control, but to cool the radial engine. Used largely as an exhibition piece at Nazi rallies, the FW-61, as it was known, reached the height of its fame when pilot Hanna Reich flew the machine inside the extremely confined area of an exhibition center. Germany successfully overcame the twin problems of maneuverability and stability and built two production models during the war. The Kolibri was a small two-seater reconnaissance and anti-submarine helicopter, and the FA-223, a scaled-up version of the FW-61, capable of a payload of over 1,000 pounds. The military uses were obvious, and mass production of over 400 a week was ordered, but Allied bombing disrupted the production, and only 10 were ever built. Isolated from this European experience, Sikorsky continued to develop his ideas throughout the 30s, and in 1939, he began construction of his first prototype, the VS-300. Details were changed daily, and before the decision on its final form was made, 18 different configurations were tried and abandoned. In the autumn of that same year, his helicopter was wheeled out on the runway at Sikorsky's plant for its first test run.
It was then in September of 1939 that the VS-300 lifted off the ground for a few brief seconds and a few brief inches. And in my father's words, the helicopter was born once again. I'd like to quote my father's exact words when he said that it was a wonderful way to relive one's life all over again. To design a new flying machine without quite knowing how to design it, and then building a new flying machine, the helicopter, without quite knowing how to build it, and then climbing into the seat of this machine and trying to lift it into the air as a test pilot without ever having flown a helicopter before in one's life.
The VS-300 had a single three-bladed main rotor and a one-bladed tail rotor to counter torque and provide a degree of rudder control. The pitch control, which alters the angle of attack of the rotors, proved successful in providing lift, but no degree of maneuverability could be obtained. It simply went up and down. 12 weeks later, Sikorsky survived yet another crash when the machine was wrecked by a gust of wind. Rebuilding the machine and adding two horizontal rotors on tail outriggers, Sikorsky, although now in his 50s, continued to pilot the test flights of his VS-300. Viewing film of the latest modification, the head of United Aircraft commented that although there was now more maneuverability and stability, at no time did he see the machine flying forwards. Sikorsky's non-defeatist reply was that it was a minor problem that he had yet to solve. But it wasn't quite as easy as he had predicted. Although breaking the world endurance record held by the FW-61 and achieving a flight duration of 1 hour, 20 minutes, the problems of forward flight were not solved until many months later. Throughout these periods of testing and retesting, Sikorsky was always keen to demonstrate other aspects of his machine. Landing in confined spaces, carrying out repairs while hovering a few feet above the ground, and demonstrating its life-saving capabilities in water. By now, he had become convinced that the solution to the problem of horizontal flight lay not in extra tail props, but in a more flexible main rotor, which could provide both lift and directional control. Eventually, he developed an effective system that was to launch the helicopter into the practical world of flight, the cyclic pitch control. By varying the angle of attack of each rotor blade, a remarkable degree of maneuverability was at last obtained. With this breakthrough, Sikorsky was now able to incorporate the cyclic pitch into the now familiar configuration of the VS-300, and the new version flew in the autumn of 1942. Within a month, he had received his first government order for the XR-4, a much larger two-seat version of the VS-300. It was the breakthrough he had longed for. Sikorsky and his division of United Aircraft gave up the production of fixed-wing aircraft and concentrated on a new area of flight, the mass production of helicopters. The XR-4 was evaluated extensively during the latter part of World War II by all branches of the U.S. Armed Forces and was used operationally to rescue downed pilots, reconnaissance, and support for the U.S. fleet. In 1944, this highly successful addition to U.S. air power achieved a new record by becoming the first helicopter to land on a moving ship. This rare footage being some of the first shot from a flying helicopter. Impressed by the XR-4, the British Royal Air Force bought the machine in 1945 to carry out extensive trials. It was to be the beginning of a long association with Sikorsky helicopters. The XR-5 followed, which was larger and more powerful, and soon proved effective as a multi-role machine in Korea, serving with both US and British forces. The British bought large numbers of the new model, which was eventually built under license in the United Kingdom by the Westland Company and renamed the Dragonfly. In November 1945, the XR-5 came to public attention during a dramatic rescue when, in heavy seas, an oil barge broke free from its tow and was driven onto Penfield Reef off the coast of Connecticut. Despite the efforts of the Coast Guard, the barge rapidly broke up and no boat could reach it. Jimmy Viner, chief test pilot at Sikorsky, took off from the nearby factory with Air Force Captain Jackson Bagel manning the hoist. Instructions had to be dropped to the stranded crew as no civilian rescue had ever taken place before. Making 2 flights in heavy rain and strong winds, Sikorsky's brainchild saved the entire crew. From the beginning, the possibilities that the helicopter provided for saving life had inspired his work, and at last, it seemed, his dream had been vindicated.
Hello, RTC. I'm ringing the bell. Yeah, this is Scrambleberry. Yes, go ahead, old boy. Aircraft crash. Single seater, 10 miles west.
Scramble, Federal 59, aircraft crash at Centennial, 1 occupant.
Man is in need, thinking, something like that. Well, the airplane can come in and throw some flowers on him. That's just about all. Direct lift aircraft could come in and save his life. Direct lift aircraft can go anywhere, anytime where there is air. And this commodity is fairly widespread over our wonderful globe. Even if the helicopter cannot land, and these were the ideas which I had fully before I started it, helicopter can use the hoist, in other words, or a cable, and can contact any place, on the ground, on a roof, on water, on a treetop, absolutely any place. Helicopter is the only thing which can do that.
In the first 20 years of the helicopter's operational use, it is estimated that it saved over 100,000 lives. In a military role, it reduced the death rate of wounded men from 4.5% in World War II to 2.5% in the Korean War. The list of civilian mass rescues is staggering. Almost 10,000 people were saved at Tampico, Mexico, during the floods of 1955. Thousands were airlifted to safety from the flood-stricken Low Countries. Rescues from ships, oil rigs, houses, and from accidents of all kinds are everyday headlines today, and it is now estimated that over 1 million human lives have been saved, a record for which Igor Sikorsky was justly proud.
In the later years of my father's life, he would often be visited by the air crews that had piloted his helicopters on very unusual and sometimes daring and sometimes dramatic rescues. His face would light up, and sometimes he would become proud and deeply emotionally involved as he heard these tales, stories of tremendous heroism, and sometimes very great danger, and sometimes incredible airmanship, as military and civilian pilots would come here and describe in their own words, pilot to pilot, what they had done or what they had been able to accomplish, very often in weather that would have probably prevented any other form of vehicle, any other form of transportation from having saved that particular person's life.
1950, Sikorsky, pressured by demands for larger and more powerful helicopters, had designed the S-55, which could carry up to 8 passengers and 2 crew. Going into mass production in 1952, it was built in large numbers in both the US and Great Britain, where it was known as the Whirlwind. Called on to fulfill many varied military and civilian tasks, the Whirlwind became the mainstay of both the Royal Air Force and Navy. But as technology moved forward, it soon proved inadequate for modern weapons systems. And in 1955, Sikorsky produced an updated version, the S-58. Although similar in appearance, it was to be more powerful in order to carry double the payload over an extended range. In Great Britain, Westlands built an even more advanced model known as the Wessex, which, powered by the new Napier turbine, had considerably improved performance. Both the 55 and 58 and their British counterparts had long and varied careers, and the aging Wessex can still be seen around the coastline of Great Britain, although much of the rescue work has now been taken over by the Sikorsky Sea King. With the helicopter and Sikorsky's reputation firmly established, Igor felt able to take a quieter role, and in 1957, at the age of 69, he retired. But not surprisingly, this was not to be the end of his design career, for he was determined to push the parameters of helicopter lift capability to their very limits. In 1957, he began preliminary design work, and a year later built the first prototype of a new piston engine research vehicle known as the S-60. Funded jointly by Sikorsky and the US Navy, it was to have an exceptionally heavy lifting capacity. And with the development of the more powerful turbine engines, Sikorsky was able to produce the S-64 Sky Crane, which first flew in 1962. Capable of carrying a load of 10 tons, its unique fuselage enabled it to carry bulky cargoes and self-contained hospital and command pods for the military. It also had a unique set of rear-facing controls, allowing great accuracy when offloading cargoes. Since its inception, the Sky Crane has been used extensively in offshore oil rig construction and played important roles in the Vietnamese conflict of the 60s, recovering 340 downed US planes from behind enemy lines. Once again, Sikorsky's unique talent had produced a remarkable aircraft.
It would be impossible to even start to enumerate the various missions which a crane helicopter can perform, because they are so really limitless, so immense in numbers and in variety. Our helicopter at present can carry a load of 10 tons. I predict that in the near future, the load can easily be doubled. In fact, we could do it anytime. We could build now a helicopter with 20-ton lifting capacity, and in the foreseeable future, we can build ship carrying 40, 50, eventually 100-ton cargo.
Although he remained active as a consultant for the next 15 years, the Sky Crane marked the end of an era, being the last major design project that Igor produced. In the years since his retirement, the helicopter has undergone rapid change, spurred on by the defense strategist's need for faster, more offensive machines. Today's industry has invested millions in new technology, pioneering the development of advanced electronics, fiber optics, millimeter wavelength radar, and developing existing systems of advanced navigational aids and automatic flight control. To oversee all this, complex onboard computers constantly update the pilot with flight information, and this new technology is continually changing the face of modern helicopter design. The company that Igor founded now produced just 3 basic helicopters: the S-76, a light, high-speed civilian transport machine, and its military derivative, the H-76, fitted with various weapon systems designed to capture the lucrative overseas market. The Super Stallion, driven by 3 gas turbine engines, giving a lifting capacity of 17 tons, and the largest helicopter of the Western world. Serving with the US Navy as a minesweeper and submarine hunter, it also acts as a fast deployment vehicle for the US Marines. Equipped with mid-air refueling systems, it has potentially unlimited range. The Blackhawk, US Army's main battlefield assault helicopter, powered by 2 1,500 horsepower engines, draws on lessons learned in the Vietnam War and is faster and more reliable than anything that's gone before. The Seahawk variant is adapted for naval support roles, including submarine detection. Its all-weather capability and winch-down landing system enables it to operate in extreme weather conditions. The Nighthawk is designed as an advanced search and rescue helicopter and contains some of the most sophisticated technology currently available. Its digital flight control and infrared night vision has expanded the US Air Force rescue capabilities beyond previous limits. Modern-day helicopter design programs are concentrated on developing a new light machine for the US Army. Termed the LHX and due to enter production in the 1990s, it will replace more than 7,000 aging Vietnam-era machines. It will be faster and more maneuverable than anything currently available. It will be able to engage in combat at night, in extreme weather, and in biological or chemical warfare. In the search for higher speeds, development has been focused on advanced rotor systems, which are currently being evaluated in wind tunnels and on prototypes. To fulfill the requirements of NASA, the 21st century designs are centered around a revolutionary new rotor system known as the X-Wing, which will overcome the high-speed limitations of today's machines in a remarkable way. Prototype testing has already begun on this futuristic machine that combines attributes of both helicopter and aeroplane. It will perform as a normal helicopter in vertical flight, then transform the rotors into a conventional wing surface for forward movement. All a far cry from those early days at the beginning of the century. Igor's legacy is a team of people with the same burning desire that he had as that young boy in Kiev with his earliest dream of flight. A dream which his son Sergei explains literally did come true.
Many years later, my father was aboard one of his giant clipper ships that was being delivered to Pan American Airways in Florida. He flew on that machine as pilot in command from Stratford on its first delivery flight to Baltimore, where they landed, took on some fuel, and then took off again to complete the flight. As they were beginning to approach Florida, my father gave the controls to the 2 Pan American pilots who were much more familiar with the local traffic and the local area and the regulations, and stepped back into the empty passenger cabin to try to get a feel for the comfort level. And as he started to walk back through this wood-paneled cabin with its deeply upholstered chairs, a strange and very weird feeling came over him, quite literally goose pimples running down his spine. And it was all so terribly and hauntingly familiar. And he stepped to the window, and he looked out, and he looked down at a green coral sea, at white sandy beaches and palm trees, as the aircraft made its final approach into Pan American's Caribbean base at Dinner Key, just outside of Miami, Florida. He stood there for a very long time, absolutely impressed with the fact that this was exactly the cabin and exactly the vibration and the noise that he had dreamt of so many years ago as a small boy in Kiev, Russia.
Igor Sikorsky died in October 1972 at the age of 84 and was buried near the spot in Connecticut where he fulfilled his dream of vertical flight.
We look at the rise of William Boeing next Sunday at 7:30 in Wings Over the World. And tonight in True Stories, visit the only hotel that operates in the Gaza Strip. and meet the incredible woman who maintains this small oasis in a desert of conflict. Malika's Hotel, coming up shortly, right after a news update.